Right, hey everyone. This is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. It's been a while, but it's time for me to do another theory video. And it's late at night here. I've got my nice little Tokyo Tower One Piece mug here. Let's see the symbol better there. Full of bourbon. So, figure why not? Let me start drinking and let me start popping some crazy ideas. Oh man, it's been a while since I've been wanting to do one of these, but One Piece chapter 923 left me so excited. Finally, after such a long time for the series, and all the potential ramifications for the story. So really wanted to talk about that and really a lot of ideas I've kind of reiterated before and a lot of ideas I want to talk about in relation to the series going forward. And so, let's get straight into it. I kind of discussed some of this already in a previous video I did, months back when I first started this channel. But that one was a little bit more messy, a little bit more... It wasn't as concise as this one, so hopefully I can make this one a little bit more direct with the ideas I kind of want to talk about. So, we'll start with that. So, where do I start? I guess we'll start with the fallout from 923. So, I'm going to preface this by saying, a lot of stuff I'm talking about in this video could potentially be disproven immediately, depending on what happens in 924 and kind of the fallout from there, because anyone that follows me on Twitter knows that I have been writing certain theories about Wano for a year plus now, and one of the biggest ones I've always been talking about was, I eventually did expect there was going to be a prison break. I expected it to happen at some point in the arc. I thought it would be a lot later than it is now. And I definitely thought, it would take place with a lot of the other Straw Hats being thrown in as well. Not just Luffy, but if Oda wants to kickstart things early, I don't really have a problem with that. But 923. The best thing it did was, it finally feels like the Straw Hats are actually in the New World. Back in the beginning of the series, we have this whole speech about, the Grand Line is the pirates' graveyard. And, it's this notorious and fantastical place. And, in Water 7 we hear, they call the second half of this the New World because it's, basically unexplored territory. And everyone that goes through it, goes to the New World, calls the first half of the Grand Line Paradise because the intense baptism you receive in the New World, is so extreme that, a lot of wannabe pirates that go into there come out with their spirits crushed and broken, and they become totally jaded because they literally did not have what it takes to survive in that sea. And to me, it makes sense that you had kind of that schism between the Grand Line and the New World because the Marines really were kind of the rulers of the first half of the Grand Line because, that's where all the weak pirates were. It was easy to take most of them down. A lot of them didn't have, fancy devil fruit powers like Logias or, mythical zones, ancient zones, stuff like that. So it was easy in the first half of the Grand Line to kind of deal with the dangers of pirates, and it makes more sense that the New World is really kind of the Emperor's territory. They're constantly at war with each other. They're there. I expect territories will be changing hands back and forth a lot. Rookies keep going into their challenges, the Emperors getting knocked down, and there's constantly there's a constant struggle to always be on top in case you lose your position. But, ever since the Straw Hats actually got into the New World, it hasn't felt like they've actually been challenged at the same level they were challenged at in the first half of the Grand Line. And I know it's tempting to kind of go, well, that's what the 2 years were for, so they didn't have to struggle when they first got into the New World. So they didn't have to go through that baptism that so many other rookies did, so they wouldn't lose, crewmates, limbs, whatever. But to me, it's always like, the 2 years of training was just kind of, in my perspective, just to kind of get them to the starting line and not be like an advanced jump start for them, because I'm not sure how many of you know about bike racing. I'm talking like, Tour de France bike racing, not like motorcycle racing. Or how many of you watched the show Yowamushi Pedal, which is about, a high school bicycle racing team. But in it, they basically have this 3 day race they call the Inter High. And in it, what happens is, on the first day, everyone races through, whatever position gets first, second, third, etc. And then on the second day, based on your position, you get a staggered start time, basically. So first, second, third position, they get to head off first in the starting line. They get like a 15-minute head start on everyone else. And, all the other riders in whatever places behind them basically have to play catch up to try to catch up to them on the second day, third day, etc. And I felt like, that's what the New World is supposed to be like as well. Like the Emperors are basically those riders in first, second, third place. And they have a huge lead among the other pirates because they have been, baptized. They've been put through the ringer. They've survived it. They've clawed their way to the top. And they have held on to their positions for, let's say around 40 plus years. I'm like just estimating here, but they've been holding those positions for a long, long time. And while I know that Luffy's training, helped shorten that gap of experience that he needed, he should still be well below the level that the Emperors are at, because it took him 2 years to basically master the basics of hockey. And you'd expect that the Emperors have, pushed themselves to the extreme where they've mastered all the types. And yet, none of the opponents he's faced in the New World have ever felt like they've actually pushed him to the extreme limits we've seen with him as opponents. Again, in the Grand Line, we know we're like Crocodile, with Lucci, even with, Marineford when he went head to head with everyone there, even Magellan and Impel Down. None of the fights felt like they've had the same stakes, the same consequences, and so that's what I loved about Kaido, because Luffy goes all out with him. He hits him with the strongest techniques we've seen him use in the series, and it doesn't mean diddly squat. Kaido swats him like a fly, and it was so glorious, because I've kept saying this like as a little mantra of mine, like over and over again, that Luffy and Zoro have gotten way too cocky over the 2 year time skip, with the fact they're just like, on Punk Hazard, Luffy tells Law that, oh yeah, I'm going to take on all the Emperors, no problem. So it doesn't matter who we start with, because I'm planning on kicking all their asses anyway, right? It makes it sound like it's a walk in the park. Like he's going to go in there, it'll be a tough fight, but he'll come out because, he's always going to win. And this is the thing that's been kind of killing me since Marineford, is what the lesson is that Luffy's basically internalized from his defeat. Because looking back on it, like, the main lesson it seems like he's learned is that, I basically wasn't strong enough during Sabaudi, during Marineford, to take on opponents of that caliber. And so, if I never want to experience that kind of loss again, all I need to do is just become stronger. And then, ever since, in the New World, all we see him do is repeating the same mistakes of lessons we should have actually learned, which is, he's always been reckless and impulsive, and he always charges into battles without thinking. And 922 to 23 is kind of the good showcase of that, where he sees Kaido attacking the town. Everyone's telling him, Luffy, don't do anything right now. You can't do anything. Hold back, we have to come up with a proper plan to defeat him. We can't do anything right now. He doesn't listen, and he just runs off to go take out Kaido. He even tells Law, what's the big deal? As long as I take him out, our problem's solved, right? And I'm glad that rather than letting him out of it, like Oda actually let him screw up, big time. Because the thing is, like, everyone's like pointing out to me on Twitter, on Discord, and all that it makes sense for Luffy to have done, what he did when he was going to rush to fight him. Because I'm just like, yeah, it makes sense from a character perspective. Like, I get everything. It makes rational sense for why he did what he did. And all the previous cases always work because he's always been able to power through with strength and willpower. And I'm so glad that Oda finally is just like, we've got to the point where that's just no longer enough. You cannot just rely on being able to go and punch your way out of your problems. You actually have to stop and start, thinking analytically. And so, that's the thing of being like, that's why I like 923, and I'm hoping 924 doesn't screw up. Is I want Luffy to overcome this whole idea of that blind faith will always win you a battle. You don't have to worry about anything else. So if 924 ends with Luffy saying saved from Kaido by either Shootenmaru or Law, I'm gonna get mad. I'm gonna get really, really, really pissed off at Oda, because I need Luffy to get tossed in prison, not because of just because of my theory ideas and things, but there has to be finally a fear of reprisal or failure knocked into Luffy's head, that he can't just willy-nilly do these things like he has been before, because there is a chance that his crew could actually get seriously hurt. So 923 thoughts out of the way. I just wanted to get that done first before I get into the theory stuff. But alright, getting on. Little bit of a aside for now. So, back to what I was saying. I have been calling for this jailbreak for a very, very, very long time. I thought initially that would play out differently with it happening with the Fire Festival. My idea was they'd get to the Fire Festival, Kaido would set a reverse trap for the Straw Hats, and then, basically from that, events will move on. But this works better because this feeds into a lot of other theory ideas I have. And so I want to talk about Reverie before we get back into Wano. Because, plot twist, I expect we are going to go back to Reverie at some point during this arc, because this again is something I've been harping on for over a year now, is that we are going to see Reverie and Wano play out simultaneously, with the events of one affecting the events of the other. And I feel like this is a good chance to kind of get to that point. And, because I've seen fan speculation based on this, because I know I'm like one of the few fans that always said, we're all going to get cutaways to Reverie. We're going to get cutaways to Reverie. Because I know everyone else, all the other fans were like, oh no, Wano's a closed country. It makes sense. We're going to finish this arc, finish the conflict with Kaido. And then since the Straw Hats will have been cut off from all contact with the outside world, when they get out of Wano, the Oda will just drop major news bombs on them about everything that happened at Reverie. And then, we'll get a flashback to all the events in there that'll happen there. And it makes sense, for what the story's going for, with them being an isolated country away from there. It makes sense for that to happen. And, it's logical and rational, but I'm a crazy theorist, so I have to put my own spin on it. So here's the thing. So Reverie, in chapter 906, it's mentioned that Reverie is a 7-day event. So we know that what the start date is from wherever it happens, nobles have a meeting for 7 days, then they all leave. Now, I don't know how much the timelines, match up for when Luffy and the Straw Hats got to Wano and when Reverie started, but climax of Wano is going to be at the Fire Festival. Like Fire Festival, and like I think a little bit after that is going to be kind of the climax of it. But so if that was what was initially going to happen, like Reverie is only going to be 1 week, Fire Festival is 2 weeks away, plays perfectly into the first ideas. And I'll admit, when I first heard that, I was like, all right, all my theories are dead in the water. None of them have a chance of coming true now. Reverie is always going to be its own thing. So Oda's going to have his own plans. Because those of you that don't know, I basically wrote an editorial about this, talking about Reverie, Wano playing out. And the big reason I was kind of like so adamant about this is Greg Werner from the One Piece podcast, Ochimusho 108, on Twitter. He posited this theory a long time ago, and I've been a strong proponent of it, is where he said that, he expects Blackbeard is going to come to Wano, towards the end of the finale, and that he is going to kill Kaido, take his Dragon Devil Fruit, complete his trifecta of having the strongest Devil Fruit of each type, Zoan, Paramecia, and Logia. And that he is going to go and attack Reverie, after having gotten the power to fly, and he's going to go and attack Reverie. I still stand by that idea. There's some slight alterations I'm now considering. One of the biggest ones, which is going to drop in here, is the idea that Marco is going to die and Blackbeard is going to steal his Phoenix Fruit, which works really well better with his other powers, but that doesn't work if Reverie ends before Wano does and everyone goes back to their homes, because if Blackbeard doesn't attack when the kings or queens are there, it really has no meaning for him to attack Reverie. I mean, there's still some there because the Elder Stars and everything, but it doesn't really play well for me. But, my idea's always been something big is going to happen at Reverie. Like I think it's like, oh, duh, obviously, of course something big's going to happen at Reverie. For me, it's like, yes, possibly a lot of some things that are going to happen, but I'm not just talking about, my ideas for what the big thing are, I think, are drastically different from what other fans expect. But in either case, I expect that whatever the big event is, it's going to derail the talks and cause the Reverie to be extended beyond the traditional deadline. So, the most obvious thing that could do this is something we've been hinted at, throughout the series, way back in Dressrosa, is Fujitora talking about how he plans to crash the meeting and talk about the abolishment of the warlord system. Again, we already know he's met with Riku and Cobra to probably ask for their support to, help with the talks when he comes to bust in, because their countries were literally the most affected by the warlord system. Both of them had their countries taken over. And that seems like it could be the most possible scenario for what happens, but Fujitora also mentioned that Vegapunk has already come up with a replacement for the warlord system. So I feel like that will make the transition easier, because I don't think any of the kings or queens are really going to have a problem if the Marines suggest that, hey, we don't want pirates to be warlords anymore, because clearly we can't trust them. They're unmanageable. System doesn't work. If it's a 7 different upgraded pacifistas being the replacements for the warlords, I can see them buying that easier. Be like, we have robots now, easier to control, not as many problems. So I think that would make the transition easier for the kings, queens to accept the abolishment of the system. So I don't think that would be a big point of contention. I do want to actually talk about Weevil with regards to that, but I'll bring that up a little bit later. But yeah, second trigger, Cobra. This one, again, something I've been speculating on for the longest time, but we know he's going to talk to the Elder Stars about the Void Century. And, I've written multiple theories about this. I'll post a link to the editorials below in the video description. But the gist of my idea is that, he'll go into a meeting with the Elder Stars, and Correa's going to basically tag along as his, quote unquote personal physician. And that, maybe she'll even end up curing him of his illness, whatever it is. That's completely unrelated thing, but I think if that happens, Correa's going to notice something interesting about the Elder Stars. Now, my biggest theory on this is, the whole riding the train of they're immortal, which to me makes sense if you look at the events of Water 7. Again, another theory I don't want to go into. I've already kind of written that up, and again, it'll be in the editorial description, so if you want to give that a read, I go into it there. But, if that's the case, could this be something else that derailed the talks? Possible. Especially if the Elder Stars, already alluded to the fact that they don't want Cobra to talk about it too much. And maybe they'll try to take him out if he does try to say something. But to me, that seems like too much of a red herring. Like, Oda's just straight up telling you that the Elder Stars will do something about Cobra. That feels too straightforward for Oda, to try to surprise the readers. So I don't feel like that will be it. Might be a part of it, but I don't think that's going to be it. And then we come to my favorite kind of theory for it, and probably the biggest question mark about Reverie: King freaking Stelly, the creepy little fuck. So, a couple of things I want to point out that stand out specifically about him. Of course, first, the very obvious one being, when he was taking the oath to be sworn in front of the empty throne, he says, oh, I want to sit on that throne one day. It's going to happen. At some point, Stelly is stupid enough and ambitious enough to go into that room and try and sit on that throne when he thinks no one is looking. And, this is like wild card speculation, but I feel like someone is going to see him in the throne room, sitting on that throne, and they're going to blackmail him into doing something. I don't know what it's going to be. I have ideas, which I'll get into, but, that's wild card speculation. I'm going to toss in a theory my little brother has in here, which is he thinks that Stelly will basically get, possessed, quote unquote, by Im, or Imu, I suppose, but I don't really buy into that theory. Again, that's just personal preference. Posited before, the Akainu seems like the most likely candidate, because, he would team up with Stelly to basically, like how he played Squard in Marineford. I could see Akainu playing Stelly like a fiddle, preying on his fears to try to get him to basically use his paranoia to make the other kings and queens kind of submit to Akainu's idea. Because, in Vivre Card Volume 3, we get some more information about Akainu. And it's pointed out that, he's ruthless, and he basically rules through fear. And anyone that doesn't agree with his sense of justice, basically gets punished, and everyone that follows him does so out of fear. So I could see him using that to his advantage to basically try to get all the kings and queens on his side, to kind of put his plans into action. But again, I'll get into a little bit stuff that later. Yeah, but I'll talk about that a little bit later, because I have theorized about this before, that he is going to eventually overthrow the world government in a military coup. Is that still going to happen? Maybe, maybe not, but it's still a definite possibility. It's still the strongest, or one of the stronger partnerships I see happening. But there's another one that also kind of came to mind when thinking about Stelly. And that is Stelly and Charlos, the other creepy little fuck on Reverie. But back in chapter 905, we saw that Stelly is supremely interested in becoming a world noble. He's bugging Garp for his quote-unquote connections about how to become a world noble. Now, Is that possible? I don't know, because we know, from Sabaudi that commoners can kind of marry into the world noble family. But based on Charles just kind of discarded his wives, I don't think a commoner would actually be considered to be part of the world nobles, especially if, to be part of them, you have to be able to trace at least some of your bloodline to one of the 20 original, I suppose 19 original families that went to Mary Joa. So even if it's not possible, I think all it comes down to is the matter of what Stelly believes. In chapter 907, we saw that Charlos tried to kidnap Shirahoshi, and he was repelled by one of the biggest black sheep families of the world nobles, Don Quixote, Miosgard, the man Otohime saved all the way back in Fishman Island, who's had become a reformed sinner. And he basically tells Shirahoshi, I will stay by your side all of Reverie and protect you from everyone else. And, he gives Leo and Sai permission to basically beat up anyone that tries to come for her. And he says, whatever you have to do to defend her, do it. And I'll take the blame for it. Now, and then, he beat up Charlos with a mace when he tried to kidnap her. And then you see later, Charlos being carted off to meet his crappy ass father, and he's swearing revenge. Charlos is not, I don't think Charlos is the kind of guy to just give up, the fight and admit defeat. So what could that lead to? I'm going to speculate and say that the celestial dragons can't personally harm or kill another celestial dragon. I don't think they would allow for basically civil war within their faction. Just like mass murder is still possible. Oda could pull anything, but I'm just going to go on the assumption that he cannot. So if he can't, Charlos will need a scapegoat, because he cannot be directly tied to the murder of another celestial dragon or even attempted murder. And remember back in chapter 586 in the Ace Luffy Sabo flashback, with Stelly's origin story, we're basically told that Stelly was adopted by Sabo's family. He came from a higher up noble family than Sabo's, and they gave him up for adoption because of special circumstances. And back in 905, we're told that Stelly married into the royal family, by marrying the princess, and that the prince and king of Goa Kingdom, died in a untimely accident right a few months before Reverie started. And it just so happens Stelly just ascends to the kingship right before Reverie. I mean, it seems a little suspicious to me, right? I mean, my best guess right now is that Stelly is either most likely a sociopath or psychopath, and there is no doubt in my mind that he played a vital role in killing off the king and prince so he could free the way to the throne. And I don't know how he did it with poison or if he framed it to look like an accident, but I am 100% convinced he is going to do it again at Reverie. So, calling it now, Stelly and Charlos will team up, with the latter, with Charlos telling him, all right, I will back you for nomination to become a celestial dragon and world noble as long as you off me Osgard so I can kidnap the giant mermaid princess. Again, is it possible to remove a noble family and become a celestial dragon? Who knows? But I have to assume that, with the spotty track record of the Don Quixotes among the other celestial dragons, I don't think they'd have a problem if he were to quietly just disappear or be offed by someone, as long as they know, it was just a one-time thing, because they really are the black sheep of the family. what was it, homing all those years ago, 30, 40 years ago, whenever it was, gave renounced his godhood, went down to live with the commoner nobles. That failed epically. Then his son killed his father, tried to come back to the Holy Land, found out what the national treasure was, used it to threaten, the world nobles later on after he escaped. And he basically stole their heavenly tribute from them. And they could not kill him for fear of reprisal from Doflamingo, for blurting out the secret of what the national treasure was. And now you have Mjolsgard, who's again falling into that same trap where he's becoming, more human. He's given up all his slaves. He's defending, the common folk. I can't see him not, building up a lot of enemies in the Celestial Dragons. Now, is Stelly actually going to successfully murder him? I don't think Oda's going to, given Oda's, propensity for not having death in the series, I don't think Mjolsgard's actually going to die. But even if Stelly fails and Mjolsgard is either put into a coma or bedridden, I feel like that effectively would remove him, remove his protection from Shirahoshi. And then Charlos would be able to go after her, without restraint now and try to kidnap her again. And then, Stelly becomes his perfect scapegoat because you have the attempted murder of a celestial dragon, attempted murder or full murder of a celestial dragon in Marijoa. And I could see that being enough cause for alarm that the Marines lock everything down until they find the suspects, or suspects that they can pin this on. And if someone spots the revolutionaries, moving about during this time, there you go. Charlos has a scapegoat. Stelly has his scapegoat. Pin everything on the revolutionaries who have a known hatred for the world government and the world nobles. And now you've got a manhunt on in Reverie. Everything is locked down as they look for the revolutionaries. So, part one, take on how Reverie could be expended. Part two, I kind of want to get into what this means for kind of the greater story. So 922 log, gave us a reminder of what exactly Kaido's beef is with the Heart Pirates and the Straw Hats. He basically tells me, Doflamingo was a weapons broker. He had to deal with Kaido, who was providing with guns, swords, etc. And the latter gave him smiles in return, which were provided by Caesar. Now, this is a big important plot point that I have not seen a lot of fans mention. But in chapter 803, when Koala is meeting with Dragon, after the revolutionaries gotten back from Dressrosa, she mentions that A, there are a number of countries involved in the weapon smuggling, and that B, the weapons were made of a special metal called drunken iron ore that only a small number of countries can make. And she points out that, they can use this information to identify who's making these weapons. Of course, revolutionaries are then attacked by Blackbeard shortly after, who came for said weapons because Burgess told him where it was. And then CP0 clashes with Blackbeard after he's raised Baltigo to the ground, and he flees and they stay behind. I feel like in the confusion of all these battles, some weapons could have been misplaced or lost during the struggle to try to get everything off and escape from the Marines. And I can't imagine that the Marines, upon examining the weapons, wouldn't have come to the same conclusion that Koala did. Because, again, chapter 907, we find out that the Marines are intercepting communications between the emperors. And, and they indicate that Big Mom and Kaido are planning to meet. I don't know if this is I have to go back and kind of read it. I don't know if this is an actual solid, yes, we are going to meet on a certain date, plans already in place and everything, or if it's just general vague ideas, but still. But you have Borsellino, ask Sakazuki, hey, should I move out to intercept them, and stop this before it's happening, because it could be dangerous if two emperors form an alliance. Because remember, way back in Skypiea, we already saw this. When Shanks was about to go meet with Whitebeard, every Marine was shitting their pants. The Elder Stars were all getting worried because they're like, why are two emperors meeting? This could be supremely dangerous because this could upset the delicate balance of the world, and swing it rapidly one way. And if Big Mom and Kaido, two of the more unhinged emperors, are about to meet, shit is about to go down. And Sakazuki basically tells Borsellino, no, stand down, there's an unknown military force on Wano, i.e. the samurai. We don't know any of the capabilities yet. We can't do anything right now. Which, while rational, also seems not out of character for Sakazuki. It doesn't seem like Sakazuki's telling the full story there. Because, information we glean from that is Akainu and Kono, the Kaido's base of operations, is on Wano. But they don't know anything else as of now. As we see later in that same chapter, Vice Admiral Momosagi is talking to Garp and she's complaining about how they should be concerned that, they're talking about Luffy. And Chaton mentions, which is Vice Admiral Brown Pig, that they can't do anything because they're tied up with Reverie. And Big Mom knows this. She knows that the Marines can't risk sending out, any kind of massive military force at this point to try to intercept her. And then when he asks, what did Akainu say? Momosagi mentions that, he said, Wano is not part of the world government. It's outside our jurisdiction. So, of course, hands are tied, basically. And then what gets even stranger, or piques my interest, is in 908, right after that, when the Reverie begins and the kings and queens are, getting together at that round table, two of them start talking about how Wano doesn't participate in the government and it's basically a lawless land, and how they can't even be sure it counts as a nation. And someone else mentions, the Navy doesn't run on money. Navy needs money because they don't run on thin air. Few ideas I'm going to tie together here. So back in Dressrosa, we learned that Akainu basically instated international military draft, which was how we got Fujitora and Ryokyugu, which was Green Bull. And armies need to pay their soldiers. You can't just draft an army and not expect them to pay them. And you also need to arm your soldiers. Two big problems you have, as soon as you induct a bunch of reserves into your forces. Wano is, because we know that based on Kaido's deal with Doflamingo, that the drunken iron ore comes from Wano. We've seen all the factories, we've seen all the mines there. It is a rich, rich resource for these minerals. Wano is such a rich area in the minerals and the weapons that, rich in this ore that you can use to make weapons. I feel like that kind of feeds into what happened with the White Town Lost flashback. Whereas if you could force this country, to be part of the world government, you could force them to pay heavenly tribute, source of funds comes in for the Marines. You could dig up the iron ore and use the factories to produce weapons for your own army. And 3, you can sell either the raw iron or the raw drunken ore or the weapons to other countries affiliated with the world government. And more specifically, if Akainu finds out that the weapons Doflamingo was using and selling to other countries came from Wano, I can't see him just sitting there, twiddling his thumbs and saying, well, too bad, it's out of my power. My hands are tied. In 923, oh man, this is like the perfect chance for so many of my ideas to come true. Because if Kaido catches Luffy, imprisons him and throws him in the jail cell, I can see him calling Big Mom and telling her, look, all right, I have Straw Hat Luffy tossed in my jail. You know, he's just sitting here rotting. Come and get him. Once you come and collect him, my debt to you is paid. Because, Big Mom did mention that Kaido has some kind of debt that she's still holding over his head. And, if Oda times that where Big Mom's arrival coincides with the start, or the end of the Fire Festival, Big Mom's like, all right, I'm going to come there for the Fire Festival. I'm going to come there the day after the Fire Festival to pick him up. Then suddenly you're putting an immense amount of stress on the Kozuki clan and the rest of the samurai on Wano because they need to end the conflict with Kaido before Big Mom and her forces show up, because there's no way they're going to survive a fight with two emperors at the same time. Just quick break. And if the Marines are still intercepting those calls between Kaido and Big Mom, they will more than likely intercept that information that Straw Hat Luffy has been beaten by Kaido and is imprisoned, and Big Mom is about to be bartering for him. Sabo is at Reverie. I can't imagine, him not learning or intercepting this communication and finding out what happened to Luffy. Quick digression before I continue on with this, but I do feel like that the revolutionaries will meet up with Riku at some point to pass on the information, because Koala did take pictures of all the countries that were involved with the weapon smuggling. And I feel like if they pass that on to Riku, he can again strengthen his argument for the abolishment of the warlord system to, bring it up as proof, be like, hey, all these weapons were involved in weapon smuggling. Doflamingo was the big head honcho running this operation. We have to abolish this and put in tighter controls. And, so if he learns about that and he tells them, that could be something else that derails Reverie. And then, news getting out of two emperors are going to meet and that Straw Hat Luffy's been captured. What is Sabo going to do? He basically stated outright his mission here is to save Kuma, possibly declare war on, the world nobles, and then skedaddle. And he cannot abandon that task to go and save Luffy on Wano, right? Not that I don't think he's not going to try, but he's basically in a bit of a bind with what to do, because especially after Ace, I don't think he'd be willing to take it on blind faith anymore that Luffy would find a way out of that situation. And this brings up the other point I was going to bring up, but back in Dressrosa, Sabo took a piece, made a Vivre card of Luffy, took a piece for himself, gave it to everyone else before he left. So if Kaido's attack on Luffy was as damaging and dangerous as it was, this is another idea I've had for a while, is, if Kaido starts torturing Luffy, like if he imprisons him and starts torturing him and his life force starts flaring, Sabo's Vivre card is going to flare just like Luffy's did when he saw Ace's lifeline flaring. And, I can't imagine him just sitting there looking at it and not being able to do anything. The question is, what is he going to do? Now we get into the really crazy theory nonsense stuff. Excuse me. So the biggest theory I've been writing so hard is that Smoker Tashiki have to show up on Wano. They are going to be the Marine representation, or at least part of the Marine representation in the arc. For me, the former showing up is a very obvious thing, because Tashigi swore, samurai, an arc. If Oda doesn't give Tashigi an arc on Wano, she's never going to get any more development going forward. It is the ideal place to bring her back. And I feel like any arc that Zoro has on Wano has to address his conflicted feelings and relationship with Tashigi, because Oda has introduced that almost 800 chapters ago now. We saw it all the way back in Logtown, where he tells her, oh, you remind me of my dead friend, I can't stand you. I can't stand your face. You remind me too much of her. And Tashigi spits out the same lines that Kuina used to, where she's like, oh, I was sorry. I was born a woman. It must be so nice being a man because you're so powerful. And he cannot just ignore the fact that he's basically introduced, Kuina's twin, and he can't just leave that as a dangling thread. So I feel like Wano has to be the arc. Tashigi comes back and he finally closes that thread. Right, so that's a strong reason I feel like Tashigi's going to be there. And I'm also going to say it again, theory I've had for a while now. But Akainu is going to entrust Green Bull to head to Wano to scope out the situation. And the Smoker, Tashigi, are going to go with him, possibly with someone else. I'll put this in the link to the editorial, but I am still riding that train of Vegapunk is going to show up there. But I'm calling it also that Bonnie is going to infiltrate Green Bull's ship and tag along with him to Wano. Why? This is possibly the craziest idea I have. I know a lot of people are going to be just like shaking their head wondering, what was it smoking when I came up with this? But here's the thing. We know that Bonnie is also at Reverie to save Kuma. And we know she has some kind of connection to him, whether sibling, wife, whatever. I've speculated on Twitter a lot about this. I'll try to dig up the links and retweet it tomorrow if anyone's interested in finding it. I'll just scroll through my timeline. It should be one of the top headers on there. But TLDR for the long and short of it, I'm on the train of they're both basically adopted siblings or family, much like Ace, Sabo, Luffy. And I think obvious plot point is yes, Bonnie helps the revolutionaries just infiltrate the place and they rescue Kuma, etc., etc. But I feel like Luffy being captured hopefully throws a major kind of wrench into that plan, because Sabo can't rescue Luffy without jeopardizing the revolutionaries' missions. And Bonnie can't save Kuma by herself. I don't think she doesn't have the resources or the support that the revolutionaries have. And Reverie being, the stronghold of the world government, it would not be easy for her to sneak Kuma out by herself. So I feel like they're going to make a pact, with Sabo capitalizing on the similar relationship they had to have with, their love for their siblings. And he's going to ask Bonnie to save Luffy for him. And he promises, that he'll save Kuma in her stead. And we know, Bonnie is really good at infiltration and espionage and escaping and getting in and out of tight places, because she managed to escape from Marineford under Akainu and go out and be a pirate. Then when he captured her again when she went after Blackbeard, again, before he headed back to Marineford, he did not take her to Impel Down. This is something else we learned. She again managed to escape, and she's been able to avoid the Marines for over 2 years. So she obviously has good skills at hiding and evading capture. And I feel like if you want to break someone out of prison, those are good skills to have. Again, Oda could prove me wrong. I could be seeing, Bonnie just staying on Reverie, but hence why I call this a crazy theory. And then, yeah, like I said, we'll see. And then my last little kind of bit on the Marines before we get into the final last bit of this theory video. I know popular fan idea that's been tossed out for a while now is that Luffy is basically going to play the role of Admiral Perry in opening the borders of Wano. And I think fan speculation is that Momo will take over as Shogun once the arc ends. It could still work. Could Wano join the world government after that happens? Maybe. But I've got another idea. Big surprise! Small digression before I go ahead with that. For those of you that don't know who Admiral Perry is, just a quick summary. He's basically a U.S. Navy general who came to Japan and basically used gunboat diplomacy to force them to open their borders to trade. So he basically showed up with 4 black ships, and said, "Open your borders, or we'll bomb the shit out of you." That to me speaks Akainu. I could see at the end of the arc Marine battleships pulling into Wano, threatening to enact a buster call on the island if the shogun does not submit to the world government. But again, more on that later. So again, long held theory of mine: Shogun of Wano is a scrub. I know everyone's just like, oh no. Zoro's opponent is going to be the Shogun. He's going to be a powerful swordsman. Again, I'm against that for other reasons, but I feel like it would work better with the Shogun being a scrub and, like a weakling coward that likes the trappings of being real ruler, all the comforts and wealth and fame of all that. And he's probably very, very charismatic, but I don't think he's very powerful. Because we know he has this whole snake theme, with his name being Kurozumi Orochi, which literally translates Orochi literally translating to snake. And so, rather than Momo taking over Shogun and Luffy being Perry, Akainu again fills that role better. And if that is the case, if Akainu does show up as Admiral Perry, and he opens the borders of Wano, you still achieve Oden's dream, but in a different way. And if he instigates a buster call and threatens to sink the island, if the Shogun is an actual figurehead and coward, I could see him switching his allegiances to the Marines and staying the de facto head of the country, as basically as a figurehead puppet. And then he becomes part of the world government. Now, would Oda do that? Would he pervert the dreams of the Kozukis to have, Oden open the borders? Be a great plot point. And also another question, I guess, is would he have Momo, become the Shogun only to become a puppet? I don't think so. I can't see him, making Momo the Shogun of Wano, and I can't see the alternative where it's he opens up the borders and it turns out that he's gonna be like, okay, all right, Wano will join the world government. Just based on everything else I said in this video, I don't see it happening, and I can't see Akainu passing up the chance to extort a resource-rich country in order to provide funding and weapons for his army. And then if he forces the government world, if he forces Wano to become part of the world government, and if Fujitora and Ryokugu are actually from Wano and are samurai, that gives him the chance again to draft more samurai into his army, expanding his power, his base force by an exponential amount. But again, crazy idea. I'll link in the thread below because I kind of go into more detail on the hows and whys there. But again, I could see that happening. Looking at throwing a lot of information at you all. A lot of process, a lot of crazy ideas. Final one, I promise. And then we're done with this. So, the big other mystery that we have yet to solve. Edward freaking Weevil. Now, I've talked about him a lot before, on Twitter, on videos, and other things. And this is my craziest theory. I will admit, this is the one where it seems like I'm almost going into denial about who he is and who other characters we've seen in Wano are. But I'm riding the crazy train. We're not going to stop here. So, easy stuff first. I still expect Weevil to show on Wano, and the biggest reason being, why would Oda have made him a warlord and introduced him in an arc after the Straw Hats are finished dealing with warlords? You know, could it be, because we know that the warlord system is going to be abolished after Reverie, so why bother making him one? If it was just a way to say, hey, this guy's powerful, you should take note of him, he's going to be a threat, that would work, except the variation, the warlords aren't on an equal spectrum strength-wise. We have everyone from Buggy to Hancock to, the world's strongest swordsman at the other end. So I feel like the diverse range of strength in the warlords doesn't really make it a good benchmark to kind of showcase this guy's notoriousness. And, the other explanation, only one I could think of, is okay, all right, he just needed to fill that vacant spot, during the time skip with someone. So, why not make it a character he's going to eventually have play a role in another arc? Again, plausible, and it does work with what Fujitora is trying to do. Where he's trying to sell that the warlord system needs to be abolished, because Porcelino points out that Weevil has racked up the highest number of casualties among all the warlords, in his hunt for the Whitebeard pirates. And he's taken out like 15 or 16 of the affiliated captains in doing so. So, there's a lot of plausibilities for why he would have introduced a character who's going to lose his position, but I'm just going to lay out some crazy ideas and some other plausibilities. So, pre-Wano, before the start, we know that when Cat Viper went to meet with Marco, he told him that I know Weevil is coming for me soon. He's going to come to this place to look for Pops' treasure. He doesn't really know anything about it, but he's going to come here and I'll have to stop him. That's why I can't go with you to Wano. I have to be here to protect Pops' hometown. And he gave Cat Viper a message. He's like, all right, I want you to tell Luffy this message. Marco knows, Whitebeard doesn't have national treasure, but Buckin doesn't. So when Weevil shows up and starts decimating everything, I expect him to take out Marco. And before he lands like a killing blow, I could see one of the villagers running up to save Marco's life, telling Buckin that, hey, this crazy mink cat came here. He and Marco had a long conversation, and he gave him a message to take to someone called Luffy on Wano. Maybe they don't know he's on Wano, but it's like, I heard all this. Leave Marco alone. I'll give you this information. Just leave us alone. I could see Buckin assuming that, that Marco is passing on the information of where Whitebeard's treasure is. And I could see that being the trigger that sends him to Wano, where she goes, we're going to go hunt down Straw Hat Luffy and force him to tell us where Whitebeard's treasure is. As an aside to that kind of one, like a parallel idea, I don't know if this is true or not because you've never gotten confirmation. But if the warlords can potentially collect bounties, again, another great incentive for Buckin to go take out Luffy, because he has a 1.5 billion berry bounty. And if he can take out Marco, I feel like Buckin would have no problem believing that he could take out Luffy, and they collect a huge reward for bringing him back, especially if he's one of the world government's most wanted people. And again, that was an aside. So that was part one of my crazy Weevil theory. Part two gets even crazier. So Ashura Doji, the demon child. All evidence points to it being Shutamaru. I mean, 99% sure that it is. When you look at everything we've seen, with the flashbacks, the design, everything fits perfectly into this idea. And especially when you look at the myth behind what the name was based on, it makes even more sense, and I kind of want to get into that a little bit first. So, Shuten Doji is a yokai from Japanese folklore, and he was the son of a human woman and the dragon Yamato no Orochi. So, he was incredibly powerful and smart for his age, and that made him an outcast. So, he was eventually orphaned, and he joined the monks, and he joined the monkhood, but he eventually became too bored because it wasn't challenging enough for him, and he eventually started drinking and carousing and all that. Came to claim the title of the little drunkard because of his habits. And one night during a festival, he put on an oni mask to scare the others, and to his horror, it would not come off, and so he retreated to the mountains ashamed. He eventually formed a group of bandits and thieves that terrorized villages, stealing food and liquor. I mean, this literally fits exactly what we've seen with Shuten Maru to a T. And, I've seen everyone speculate that, Shuten Maru and Ashura Doji, if you take it apart, both are from Shuten Doji with different parts of the name. So it makes sense that, he's just a single character that's just taken on a different name to hide from Kaido, or that he changed his name from Ashura Doji to Shuten Maru, one being Demon Child and one being Heaven something, to kind of signify his change of allegiance to Oden. Again, so it makes total sense that is what it is. But just a little bit more to the myth first. So eventually, a hero called Minamoto no Yoromitsu attacked his palace and chopped off, Shuten Doji's head to stop his reign of terror. Now, there's a second part to this tale regarding someone called Ibaraki Doji. He was Shuten Maru's right hand. Now, here's where the confusion comes in. So, in the folklore, there's confusion over the gender of this demon. Some were claiming it was a woman, and it was actually Shuten Doji's lover and, right hand. And others claim it was a man. But basically what happened is after Minamoto returned from defeating Shuten Doji, he was celebrating at the house of one of his deputies. And the deputy was called to the gate where he was attacked by a giant demon hand. And he chopped it off. The demon later came back disguised as the deputy's wet nurse to steal back her arm. And then she was never seen again. Based on this, like I said, it would seem Oda drew inspiration from this and had Ashura Doji later turn into Shuten Maru and they're the same person. But what if they're actually either two different people or if they're actually twins? Because, before the Shuten Maru reveals what he looked like and everything, what struck me instantly was the idea that Weevil is somehow related to being Ashura Doji, not only because of the demon child descriptor kind of fitting in with his mentality, but when you're researching the yokai folklore behind this, what struck me as interesting is that Weevil has scars encircling one of his hands and a scar encircling his neck, looking like he's been stitched together after losing both of those. And it fits too perfectly with both the myth of Shuten Doji, who got his head chopped off, and Ibaraki Doji, who got his hand chopped off. And I think one thing the fandom can kind of agree on is that we are expecting Gecko Moria to come back in Wano and kind of finish off his feud with Kaido. And so, to me, it's like, all right, this is again an idea I've had forever, is what if Weevil, Buckin, and Moria are working together, and Weevil was stitched back together by Hogback. And that's why he's got, those very zombie-like looking scars around his neck. And if you look at the Shuten Doji myth, it kind of makes sense that what if Oda took this myth and split it into three people, where you have Buckin basically playing the role of the wet nurse that's guiding the demon, which is Ibaraki Doji, Shuten Doji, whatever. and then you have the other one. Because while I was looking into, the folklore of this, there are also differences in, you know, the origins of which mountain Shuten Doji came from, and I think Ibaraki Doji came from. There was two different mountains they came from. So what if that's the case? Shutenmaru and his mountain bandits are from one place, and Ashura Doji, or if he is Weevil, came from another one. I admit this theory is the biggest stretch one I have out of all of them. A lot of this is just hopeful speculation based on personal preference. And I'll straight up admit that, I'm trying to tie in a lot of loose ends with very little information together. But, at this point, I feel like I'm not too far off because I feel like there isn't much left in the series at this point. Because post Wano, we've really only got Elbaf, the final war conflict. Elbaf in the final war conflict with Big Mom. You got Raftel, might be its own separate arc. And then you got the final war. Oda's got maybe 10 years left. I can't see him kind of really giving us like any cooldown stuff or like any mini fun adventuring arcs after this. And I feel like he's going to have to ramp up the pace going forward. Again, like I've been parroting this like so over and over again, but I feel like Wano is really going to be the tipping point for what's going to happen in the series going forward. And we're going to have basically a fire lit under everyone where, it's going to be a mad rush kind of the finale after the events of Wano. So I feel like this fits in with the idea that, Oda has to start bringing these characters together now, tying all these threads together so he can start wrapping them up into a nice, pretty little bow, for the end part of whatever he has planned. But the one thing I'm like 10 million % sure of is whatever arc Weevil shows up in, whether it's Wano, whether it's Elbaf, whether it's something else, it has to involve Crocodile and Bonnie. Because all these characters have a history with Whitebeard, and I cannot see a story like that being wrapped up without them, confronting the so-called son of Whitebeard. I just don't see it happening. So, whichever arc it happens, they have to come back in. And I get the feeling, I understand the idea, like the trepidation of Wano would feel too bloated with all of these characters. But if, thinking of the final war, thinking of how many characters are going to show up, how many crews, how many people we're going to have, and just how much is going to be going on, it's going to dwarf everything we've seen in scope and scale so far. And I feel like Oda needs to start practicing now to kind of get the hang of handling larger scale conflicts, or else when he finally does reach that final arc, it's going to feel very scattered and all over the place. So, Wano seems like the perfect arc to kind of start this and start practicing, because Kaido has said, I want a war unlike the likes of which have never been seen before. And again, Greg Werner, with the One Piece podcast, has said before that he expects, a multi-island battle to play out at the end of Wano, with 4 different islands for the 4 main islands of Japan, each one being taken over by one of Kaido's calamities leading it. And I can see that happening. And again, feels like that would be a good prelude for what's coming in the finale. But like I said, pure speculation at this point, and we need to see if Oda just steamrolls me, or if I'm not totally bonkers crazy. But yeah, 924 will be the first test in that. We'll see, because if Luffy doesn't get imprisoned, like I said, you can just write all of this off, but really hoping that's not the case. But yeah, I think I'm going to cut it off here. I've ranted long enough, I think. It's been probably an hour or so. been talking about this. But yeah, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed my ideas. Let me know if there's anything you agree with, disagree with, want to discuss, talk more about. Feel free to hit me up either here or on Twitter. Apologies in advance. My One Piece 924 review will be late whenever it comes out. I'm going to be busy on the day the chapter drops, and I won't be free until nighttime, so I apologize for when I get that out. Hopefully it won't be too late. But yeah, I'll get it out ASAP. And yeah, if you like my video, please leave comments, subscribe, all that good stuff. And hopefully I can start expanding my channel's scope as well next year. And I'm very, very tired now. So until next time, I'll talk to you then.